For the first time in 9 years, Call of Duty is finally heading back to the World War II era. It's great to see this after so many fans have been requesting a return to the old school gameplay when the franchise was near its prime time in population. Not to mention the old boots on the ground, no health regeneration gameplay to return as well. And this being a World War II game, there are most likely to be some featured historical battles that will take place in the campaign. So the campaign for this game is to be set between 1944 and 1945. It's mainly going to be centered around the Allied invasion of Normandy, and one of the battles we will be visiting in the campaign is the Battle of Hurtgen Forest. Many of us are familiar with the D-Day landings and the Battle of Berlin, but the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest, which was in between those two battles, is very rarely ever talked about. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you guys a rundown of what happened at the Battle of Hurtgen Forest. August 1944, 2 months after the D-Day landings. The Allied had secured and liberated all of France, and Germany was on the retreat. It was predicted by many that the war would be over before Christmas. The Allied invasion had proven to be much more successful than people thought. However, the German resistance was a lot stronger than the Allies thought, and the war wouldn't come to an end until May 1945. And the Battle of the Hurtgen Forest was one of the first signs for the Allies that the Nazis weren't going to be giving up that easily. So, on September the 19th, 1944, the Allies were about to reach the German-Belgian border. The American First Army, which is actually the division you're playing a part in the campaign of the game, were to launch 2 attacks near the border. One was aimed at the German city of Aachen, the other was through the 50 square miles of Hurtgen Forest, aimed to wipe out any German forces that might have been stationed there. Now this was a very controversial decision. Some people were opposed to this idea, believing that there was no reason to go through the forest because either it could have been a waste of time or resulted in just a massive holdup. And if they did go through the forest, it would have been a very dangerous idea as well, because the people who planned these battles out would use air reconnaissance photos to analyze the terrain. But because it's a forest, you're not going to get close-up photos of the terrain, so they would have absolutely no idea how well the Germans were dug in and prepared. However, General Courtney Hodges, who was in command of the First Army, wanted to know for sure of how many Germans were there. So he sent in part of the American First Army, who would be followed by other divisions sooner on, to go through the forest. Little did they know that there were around 5,000 Germans dug in and well prepared to defend. The Germans would hide in dirt bunkers and pillboxes. They would place trip mines and bouncing betties, all while being armed with MGs and mortars. Once the soldiers entered the forest, they would soon find out how much of an awful place the forest was to fight in. The forest was full of fir trees that in some places only grew about 4 feet apart, so there was very little open space. The weather wasn't much help either. It was constantly dark and foggy and dense. The soldiers progressed very slowly through the forest. After 3 weeks, the soldiers had only moved 3 miles. And in those 3 weeks, the Americans had already lost 4,500 men. The constant dense fog made it difficult for the soldiers to see one another, and when it came to the enemy, it was almost impossible to see them. In fact, the fog had so much of an impact that the soldiers later on were told to never ever shout out where they were, because chances are they were lying. Also, the tanks were having a hard time progressing through the forest as well, due to the very few lanes that the forest had open for it. And the lanes that were there were muddy, slippery, and sometimes blocked off. Despite all of that though, the American First Army completed their first objective after just 2 days, capturing a little town called Schmidt. However, the next morning the Germans launched a counterattack and retook the town. The battle lines became very confusing. To give an example of this, the Americans only used 1 building in that village to treat the wounded, and it turned out the Germans also used that same building to treat the wounded as well. Depending on who had control over the town would use that same building. When it got to late November, the snow started to fall, resulting in thousands of soldiers developing trench foot. Once the Germans had regained the town, they got more artillery reinforcements and wasted no time using them on the Americans, hoping that they would retreat. This tug-of-war battle went on for months. Divisions from both sides were being replaced and sent back constantly. The soldiers' morale was so low at times that many shot themselves in the foot so they would endure no more on the front lines. By December, the Americans had sent in more than 120,000 men into the forest. The Germans had reinforced around 80,000. And when the battle ended in a German defensive victory on December the 16th, 1944, it was estimated that the Americans lost over 33,000 men. The Germans lost around 28,000. Both sides lost at least 25% of their total troop strength from the beginning, and that's what happened at the Battle of Hurtgen Forest. I look forward to seeing how Sledgehammer go about telling their story in their new game Call of Duty World War II. I very much look forward to the story of this game and hope that it delivers. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. If you want me to do more of these kind of videos, let me know. Thanks for watching, take care of yourselves, see you later.
Welcome to the bloody first. You're a long way from Texas, farm boy.